All right, let's take you through our first story here on India's response to the attacks on Iran. We saw the war in West Asia unfolding. The last 4 days have been chaotic, intense, devastating. West Asia literally up in flames, many parts of it. In a coordinated assault, the United States and Israel struck Iranian military, nuclear and leadership targets. Israel termed it Operation Roaring Lion. Washington termed it Operation Epic Fury. Tehran has responded with fury, missiles over Tel Aviv, strikes across the Gulf nations and widening arc of instability. But then came the news confirmed by the Iranian state media that Iran's hardline supreme leader of almost 4 decades, Ali Khamenei, has been killed. And India, that has for decades perfected the art of parallel diplomacy, strong defense ties with Israel that we've had, deep civilizational and energy ties that we've had with Iran, strategic partnerships across the Gulf, India has remained silent after Khamenei's death. In fact, after his assassination. Sure, New Delhi has repeatedly called for dialogue, peace and stability in West Asia, but it's yet to condemn the killing of Khamenei. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has spoken to leaders in countries hit by Iranian retaliation in the last 48 hours. He's spoken to leaders of UAE, of Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait, Qatar. And he's also held conversations with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. India has called for restraint, respect for sovereignty and de-escalation, but there's been no explicit condemnation of the US-Israel strikes on Iran. And conspicuously, no official reaction to the reported assassination of Khamenei. The government says this is responsible diplomacy and not silence. But this silence, coming on the back of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's Israel visit recently, has been read by many, including former Congress President Sonia Gandhi, as a clear signal that India has chosen a side. Former Congress President Sonia Gandhi says the government's silence is not neutrality but abdication. Rahul Gandhi has called for moral clarity, asking where does India stand here? What does Prime Minister Narendra Modi have to say about this war? In fact, Rahul Gandhi argues that unilateral attacks and retaliatory strikes must both be condemned openly, and that India's foreign policy rooted in sovereignty and peaceful dispute resolution must remain consistent. Shiv Sena UBT, on the other hand, in its mouthpiece Samana, has described Khamenei as a fiercely self-respecting leader who stood up against global superpowers who try to impose their ideas on Iran. The BJP counters it, saying when Libya's Muammar Gaddafi was killed during the UPA era, where was any formal condolences at that point? Why now selective outrage? Why didn't the Congress speak up then? Let's not forget Ayatollah Ali Khamenei repeatedly commented on India's internal matters. In fact, Khamenei has been very vocal about Kashmir, about CAA protests, about Delhi riots, comparisons to Gaza, prompting diplomatic protests from New Delhi as well, asking Iran to stay off and stay away from internal matters of India. And if you really look at it, 57 members of the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation have not said anything. Fewer than 10 of them have publicly come out to condole Khamenei's death. The Muslim world itself appears divided on this. But it seems that India's balancing act here, not really condemning these strikes, but yet at the same time saying that sovereignty must be upheld, is now facing flack from people within the country, the opposition. Is India being pragmatic or politically evasive? Let me bring in Ambassador Yogesh Gupta, former Indian diplomat. We also have Air Commodore Ashminder Singh Bahal, defense and geopolitical expert, Adit Kothari, foreign affairs and policy expert, to give us a little sense on India's position at this point, even though the government has not said much. Does this mean diplomacy by itself? Ambassador Yogesh Gupta, would you want to comment on that? India not saying anything, is that a way of diplomacy in your view?
No, I don't think that India has not said anything. You know, Nabila, we have to keep in mind that the government's position always has to protect the national interest. You know, an individual or a political party may think differently, keeping in view its own interest or keeping in view its own version of morality or whatever else it might feel. But the government has to be very conscious of our national interest. Now, what are our national interests in this war? The most important national interest that we have is that we have a large number of Indian nationals some 8 to 9 millions who are living in this region, Gulf region. And they are doing their jobs, they are happily working there, they are settled there. We have to make sure that this war does not result in their uprootment. That is the first most important national interest. Secondly, we are getting large quantities, I think about 50% of our oil and gas supplies from countries in this region. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, you have others like Qatar and so on. So that is something important for our energy security. The third important thing is that we have a huge trade with countries in this region. And the fourth important thing is that United States is the single superpower now. We have to be very mindful of whatever position we take because we already have had a tough time with the US on the issue of tariffs and so on. So while condemning anyone, is possible or is done, can be done, but it hurts our national interest. So we have to be mindful. Now, what happened when India had to face a similar problem situation last year? Operation Sindoor. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel was the only leader who spoke to Prime Minister Modi and actually sent military assistance, including his advisors, to deal with the Pakistani threat. He was the only leader. So how can we forget that? We have very important relations with Israel. We have very important cooperation with Israel on the defense side and in other fields.
What's our cooperation and coordination with Iran? We have cultural ties with Iran, we have energy ties with Iran, and it's been a long-standing one.
Well, if you want me to go historically, then Iranians were the luteras who came to India and looted India, historically.
Then why is India been so friendly?
Nadir Shah, Ahmad Abdali, and so on. More recently, Iranians, they were very quick to criticize Khamenei and company. They were very quick to criticize India on the issue of Kashmir. Okay, so it's not that I'm not saying that relationship with Iran is not important, but we have to keep all these things in mind. We can't. We have been buying some oil from Iran.
It's not as if this is just anybody who's been assassinated. It's the supreme leader Khamenei who's directly interacted with India, Prime Minister Modi on several occasions. So in that sense, as a country that's been so far very diplomatic, even on that for that matter, when it comes to the war that Israel has launched with Gaza and the occupation of land in West Bank, India has voted against it. So, where India had to speak, they've spoken in the past. Why not now?
I would say that, we should be very mindful of our national interests. National interests come before anything else. We can't be emotional about these things.
So how is it national interest by not speaking or condemning Khamenei's assassination? Do you believe this is an overreach, sir? Do you believe that the US and Israel striking Iran is an overreach?
Well, yes, I was not, I find it very difficult to understand why the US and Israel, they have made this attack. What will they gain at the end of the day? Because if they were thinking that this attack would lead to regime change, that has not happened. The position of the US on the issue of regime change has silently undergone a change, and now they are trying to justify this attack in terms of past hostility of Iran. You may remember that sometime back Iranians ordered, or were involved in attempted assassination of candidate Trump when he was seeking, the president the second time.
Yeah.
And Trump is a very vindictive fellow. He doesn't forget these things. So that is one. And secondly, I think the Americans also realize that, in addition to a regime change, this war may result in, increase in the price of oil, problems in the supply of oil. This may result in a widespread dislocation of trade and so on. So I think gradually they are going to change their position, and hopefully, one hopes that the war will come to an end sooner rather than later.
Right. Air Commodore, would you want to comment on that? I've heard your views on this. We had this talk even yesterday. I know where you stand on that, but repeat for us.
Yeah.
India not openly naming the aggressor, but yet saying we call for restraint. Is that good enough?
Yeah. Can you give me a few minutes so that
Sure.
I can articulate my logic
Sure.
right from the word go? If you look at the Nehruvian philosophy, it was a non alignment. But subsequently, when we faced the threat in 1971 war, and that's the time we had a 25 years of friendship and peace treaty with Russia. So whilst maintaining a non-alignment, our strategic leaning was towards Russia, and they really helped us out during that period of time. And subsequently, in many years later, that is in 2011, we had large amounts of oil being purchased from Iran, which, if I remember right, was 1.4 million barrels per day. Now, in addition to this, when Manmohan Singh came in, there was again a shift. And I remember him articulating, because I heard his entire speech of foreign policy, and he says primacy of national interests, and he dwelled a lot of time on that. So our foreign policy continued to change, and that's the time that we had actually started buying defense equipment also from Israel. And we had the AWACS radar Falcon coming from there, drones coming from there, a large numbers, 200 of the drones that we bought from Israel. And then came Modi ji's period. And again, there is a shift. There is no doubt that there is a shift. It's multilateral. I would put it as multilateral engagement with a lot of bias on strategic autonomy, and hence again placing your heel on national interests, means where your national interests are. But my request to you is, please look at it not just as have we shifted in alignment, because we are still maintaining strategic autonomy, but at the same time our strategic leanings have changed. We are now more in line with France, Israel, and the US than we were ever before. And I want to come out here and tell you something very, very important. And that important thing is that we have to keep the strategic environment in mind when we deal with foreign policies. For example, when it was Nehruvian time or Mrs. Gandhi's time, our strategic priorities were more towards defending our national borders, building up our economy, industry. And at that period of time, there was nobody who was helping us besides Russia. And so our focus had to be there. And when the strategic environment today is of neo-colonism and taking over Venezuela, Greenland being some kind of a state, or Canada being a state, no, like that, when we are talking of those and attacks being carried out in Iran to knock off Ayatollah Khomeini, who is considered to be a descendant of Prophet Muhammad by the Shias, and large amount of Shia community has protested. So when we are looking at this entire geopolitical environment, what Modi ji is doing is what neo-realism, I would call it, that there is no choice. He has to be practical. He has to be practical and look at the interests of India first, and which is exactly what Ambassador Sir was also trying to say. And I'm sure my speaker, because I saw him nodding, there is no choice. You're getting 50% of your oil, 55% of your LNG, 85% of your LPG from Straits of Hormuz. And you have UAE, Qatar, Oman there. And there is no doubt that we have 90 lakh people there. Our second highest remittances come from UAE, 19.2%, after USA at 27.7. I'm giving you these figures of 2024. And we are looking at that 38% of our foreign remittances come from this region, and that amounts to close to $45 billion. Now, when we look at all these aspects, where is the choice? And now the hegemony being from the US, we have to protect our interest with respect to the US while not antagonizing people who get antagonized very easily. Now, the foreign policy being followed is not that of a court primacy by Trump, but it is primarily his personal likes, dislikes, and the neo-colonist policy that he wants when he talks of MAGA. And I'm again assuring you, it is not MAGA actually that he's following, because MAGA didn't want any wars, external wars. It is basically he wants Trump as being the first person and maybe looking at a Nobel Peace Prize. But how do you look at Nobel Peace Prize when you are starting more wars than you are finishing? So when I'm telling you this complex geopolitical environment, if you are in Modi ji's shoes, what will you do otherwise? You have to speak to all the Gulf nations to protect the interests of India and to protect the interests of the people who are there as labor, construction workers, caregivers, or IT specialists. You have to look after their interests. There is no choice. You have to be practical, and that is why I call it as a neo-realist policy today. It may sound that he's moving away from our traditional allies, but when we are talking of traditional allies, when you yourself are caught up in a situation, then in that situation, you are looking at, we have reduced our defense purchases from 72% in 2010 to 14 from Russia to 36% in 2020 to 24. This is CIPRI's figures. And our focus has now shifted to France second, US third, and Israel fourth. And we are looking at high technology. Somehow we cannot get that high technology from the East or from Russia. So we are looking at it to get from the Western countries. And our primacy of national defense again comes up there. Then we have a complicated environment of Pakistan and China on our borders. So where is the leeway? I personally feel that when you sit in the Prime Minister's chair, you have very limited. When Congress party had people in that chair, they also took decisions on national interest by having a non-alignment but with strategic leaning towards Russia.
Give us a
So
little,
similarly,
sir. Would you give us a little reference to what the Congress saying that this is an absolute overreach on the part of US and Israel? Why couldn't you condemn it when Manmohan Singh was there? He condemned it. What happened in Iraq? He condemned it openly while on US soil. So why can't our Indian Prime Minister today condemn it? This is the politics that's now brewing.
no, look at it this way. You have a not very stable or a matured leader as the head of the most powerful country in the world. Would you like to antagonize him? I'm telling you, this is neo-realism. If you go and antagonize him and he does 50%, 100% tariffs put onto you, who's suffering? Our businesses are suffering, our people are suffering. And again, the people who are living very close, like highest remittances still come from US. So when we are looking at the current geopolitical environment, and being a realist, there is very limited choice for whoever is the prime minister sitting there. What choices he has? Will he antagonize a person who easily gets antagonized?
Adit Kothari, on India's access to Iranian oil, either way, it's since the Israel-Iran skirmish started. I'm saying a year or two ago, it was a skirmish that's now led to full-blown war. From then on, I think India has been struggling and that supply flow has been choked. Where has India moved after that? India has found alternatives. Give us what are those alternatives? And just before Khamenei was assassinated, what was India's equations and relation with Iran?
So when we look at the oil aspect, I mean, before 2022, India was hardly buying any Russian oil. It was negligible. So market forces decided, and as a consequence, because of the kind of discounts that we were getting on Russian oil, India, pragmatically chose to pivot away to buying a lot of Russian crude as a consequence, to the tune of, I think last year, June, we were purchasing around 2.10 million barrels a day, highest in the last 11 months as a consequence, which has come down today to roughly about 1.3, 1.2 circa million barrels a day. So it's not completely zero, but it's strategically come down quite a bit because of the, of course, pressures amassed by the US transactional Trump. And of course, the market forces deciding the discounts, which used to be, 10 to 12 dollars a barrel, today have come down to about $3 to $4 a barrel. So as a consequence, the offset, it was more strategic for us to reduce our dependency on Russian oil and pivot away into other domains. Now, India has been buying a lot of Gulf oil. So today, if Strait of Hormuz does get into contention, if it does get into some sort of paralysis, India's interest will be hit from a short-term strategic aspect. But India has been diversifying away as well. So we have, sort of contracts in place with Angola, with Nigeria, and the United States as well. So I don't think either from a short-term or a long-term perspective, this is going to be a massive deal breaker for India. It is, of course, going to hurt us, but not something which we will not be able to mitigate at the end of the day. What is really going to hurt us is the consumption of LPG and LNG. Almost 30% of our supply is actually coming from crude, from Qatar. Now, as a consequence of Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz being paralyzed, that could hurt us significantly, which is why we've seen the new kind of directives that the government of India has put in today, where natural gas has to be rationed to a certain degree. So we are going into that domain. So we're a bit more pragmatic. We are trying to realize that we will eventually have to mitigate this in case if this goes beyond 4 weeks, which I think it will. I mean, if today the United States is saying that we are prepared to go on for 4 weeks, I'm sure that they've spoken to their allies and their partners that from a contingency perspective, please be ready for a long haul. But why India has not condemned Iran, I think that is the important bit. I think condemning allies at this point risks economic and diplomatic sort of stagnation for India, which outweighs ties with a sort of a sanctioned nation. I mean, bear in mind that India is actually not buying any oil from Iran. The only strategic partnership that India really has in terms of investment with Iran is the Chahabar port, direct access into Afghanistan and Central Asia. But given the kind of relations that India has shared with Iran, whether regime change or not, whether the United States and Israel has been able to get a deal in place with a new regime that is in place in Iran, I think our strategic interest in Iran from a Chahabar perspective continue to stay alive. I don't think that is going to come into much of a harm's way. So all in all, I think this was a strategic pivot away. India needs to be balanced. While non-aligned is from a rhetoric perspective, it sounds very nice. The strong historical support for Palestine still continues to linger on, but we have to realize that our national security issues, which get mitigated with a partnership with the United States, our strategic autonomy, which get heightened by partnership with Israel, is the new reality, with Quad also coming into the play of things. Nabila.
Right. Ambassador, a quick one. Can India act as a mediator? Are we reserving space for that?
Well, yes, we can play a certain role, but there are other countries also who are pretty active in this, and we must not forget that at the end of the day, United States is willing to talk to Iran, and now Iran may even be willing to talk directly to the United States. There are so many countries in Europe who are willing to play that role, so there is no shortage of mediators. India can also do some work there.
All right. Well, there are reports surfacing that the interim leader after Khamenei has also been shot dead. I beg your pardon, has been killed, not shot dead, but God knows what is struck on him, or whether it has or not. We don't know what's falling where. But no official reports have come out. What's your take on that? Do you believe Iran could be very strategically keeping this information close to their chest? Because Israel, US have confirmed and have said it time and again. US NSA says we have confirmed reports that he's dead.
And Nabila, let's remember that the mullahs in Iran, they have completely alienated a large section of the population. Economically, their rule has been a disaster. The economy has completely been destroyed by the mullahs. And so there are a whole lot of people who are angry with them. And these are the people who are providing information to Israel. So, one Khamenei or his successor may hit anywhere. He may, others are so quick to tell the Israelis where they are heading. So I am not surprised at all. I mean, this is a.
We have a lot of life left, as much as we're looking at all those apocalyptic visuals and scenes coming from Iran and parts of Tehran and elsewhere. How is Iran holding up? I mean, are they powerful enough to continue this for the next 2 months? Because Trump says this will go on for 2 months.
Look, Trump keeps on saying so many things. It's not that what Trump has said today will not change tomorrow.
We've been thinking of the same, but clearly we can't take Trump lightly, As much as he's said a lot of frivolous things and he's done many things we never expected, including this.
But also remember that in 2 days' time, the US has gone back on its demand of regime change. Now they are saying that this is not directed at regime change. So it is not that the US won't revise its position. US would also revise its position if the Iranians give a firm and determined response, which they are trying to do now. So everything is subject to change depending on how the situation at the war
The
front
US has
goes on.
constantly been revising its position. First, he said it was because they are killing their own people. The regime change must happen because
Yeah.
they are committing war crimes. Then he says he tried to kill me, so I got him before he got me. Then he said, all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And then there's also talk about oil, and there's a China angle that this could be to choke China.
No, this is a completely unnecessary war like Iraq. There is no justification for this war. But Trump being Trump, what he has done, we have to face. The world has to face. There is no country which is willing to resist Trump. No country which is willing to openly come and defend Trump's victim. That's a problem. China's response has been muted. Russia's response has been weak. Kya kare?
Air Commodore, final word. Do you believe Iran has the capacity to go on? What, in your view, would happen? Will there be a regime change?
Yeah, can I take 2 minutes and one
Sir,
line
1
on
minute,
our
sir. Just a minute, please.
Okay, our cultural link started with Indo-Aryans moving from Central Asia and Iran. Actually, the northern parts of India in 1500 BC, that is Punjab, Haryana today, were in and including Pakistani Punjab was actually from there. And then the Cyrus the Great came in 550 BC, and again there was a lot of influence into the Indus Valley and Jhelum rivers. So, what I want to tell you is that we have had close cultural links with Iran. There is no doubt about it. And secondly, they have been resilient. And this is why I linked up with history. We have seen through history that Iranians have been resilient. And right now, most of their capability, which is in drones, missiles, and cruise missiles, that is ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, is underground. And there is a network of hundreds of square kilometers of tunnels which are entering, exiting, and it's like an underground city, and from 500 feet to 500 meters, and no bunker buster bomb can reach that height. And this has been expanded in the last 8 months. So what I want to tell you is that there are tens of thousands of drones that are available today with them, though the missile strength is much lower and is reducing, but the drones are adequate for them to last even a month. I'm taking outside shot. Earlier I was saying 2 weeks, but now considering their drone strength and the effectiveness with which the drones are hitting the embassies, hitting oil targets like Aramco, or hitting LNG centers, I think drones are not being able to intercepted by their THAAD or their Patriot systems, and they have beaten them at that. So whilst there'll be a lot of destruction in Iran, whilst the leadership like Arafi, you were telling us just now that Arafi has been killed. If Arafi has been killed, there is another succession line. You have 6 more people, including the son of Ayatollah Khamenei, Mojtaba and Hassan, the grandson of the founder. So when we have this whole lot available, one by one, the second and third line succession will come in. And also what will happen is that they'll be able to protract the war. One very interesting statement made by Israel today was they are not going to put in ground troops. This puts America in a very difficult situation. If they have to do any kind of regime change, they have to put boots on ground, which means nearly 2.5 to 3 lakh people they have to move in, and they have to move it in Iraq, they have to move it in Pakistan, then logistics support. It is not going to take place for the next few months, even if they want to put boots on ground. It is not like an operation that was carried out in Venezuela, because there is no IRGC in Venezuela. There is no theological thinking in the military that overshoots the standard thinking of any army or armed forces. So my feeling is that if the war gets protected, it will be not in the interests of America. The body bags are going to increase. And when the body bags increase, Trump in any case is not going to make it in the midterm elections. As of this moment, it will be extremely tough for him.
All right. Thanks very much. I really appreciate all of you. From the sense that I get from all of you is that India is doing the right thing by being careful, tiptoeing around what it says, who it speaks to, and what position we hold. And so far, Prime Minister Modi has not, India has not condemned Khamenei's assassination, but at the same time is looking forward to the interests of Indians stranded in many of these Gulf countries, and have spoken to all the Gulf leaders, spoken to Benjamin Netanyahu, has asked for restraint, and that's that we're towing a line to ensure citizen and their cause comes first. Thanks very much, all of you, for joining us.